Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. In a galaxy where peace is a fragile veneer, what happens when humanity, the feared peacekeepers, are drawn into a war that questions the very fabric of their morality and might? Let's get into the story. In the vast expanse of the cosmos, peace was a delicate balance, easily shattered by the ambitions of empires. The Murata, an insectile race hungry for conquest, set their sights on a star system teeming with mineral-rich asteroids, a perfect launchpad to fuel their relentless expansion. One inconvenient detail marred their plans: the stubborn presence of the Weyam, a subterranean race of industrious miners already entrenched on one of the moons. Ancient treaties meant little when a potential empire beckoned, and the Murata, confident in their numbers and technology, issued an ultimatum: surrender or be eradicated. To the Weyam, for whom retreating meant the loss of generations of backbreaking work, the choice seemed clear. War it was. Battle lines etched themselves across the void, fleets bristling with weaponry, both sides prepared to fight their corner in this brutal galactic arena. The seasoned Weyam braced themselves for the onslaught. They knew of the Murata's merciless tactics, their disregard for anything resembling rules of engagement. It would be an ugly war, and they doubted even a staunch defense couldn't hold back the ravenous insectoids for long. But as the first Murata assault cruisers materialized from hyperspace, a more terrifying sight greeted them. Amidst the flurry of laser fire and panic transmissions, sleek warships tore through the darkness, not the crude blocky vessels of the Weyam, and certainly not their own. These ships exuded an alien elegance and a terrifying cold efficiency. Humans, the legendary peacekeepers. The galaxy's worst nightmare come true if you were the aggressor. Word of the brewing conflict had traveled faster than the Murata anticipated, reaching the watchful eyes of nearby human outposts. An isolated planet on the edge of known space wouldn't normally warrant such swift intervention, but the Weyam were valued allies within the human-led galactic community, and their potential demise threatened the delicate balance of power. Despite the outpost's remote location, the humans swiftly mobilized, recognizing the strategic importance of intervening to maintain stability. This was precisely the situation humans excelled at, stemming the spread of senseless violence. The Murata, confident in their superiority, were caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the humans. Their isolationist tendencies had shielded them from knowledge of the broader galactic community. Now faced with a formidable adversary, the Murata hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Their history was one of triumph through overwhelming force. They saw this not as peacekeeping, but as a challenge to their burgeoning dominance. Blinded by arrogance, they doubled down on the attack, directing a portion of their fleet to engage the new threat. The first salvos bounced harmlessly off energy shields that flickered around the human ships. The Murata commanders stared in disbelief, a cold fear creeping into their segmented bellies. They were outmatched, and with horrifying swiftness that fact became undeniable. The human vessels retaliated, unleashing a symphony of destruction. Lasers lanced across the swarm of Murata fighters, vaporizing them with clinical precision. Attack cruisers, behemoths bristling with weaponry, melted under sustained barrages. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Amidst the slaughter, the Murata command ship issued a frantic, panicked order: retreat, flee, live to fight another day. Yet even retreat proved a dangerous gamble. The humans moved with a speed and agility that belied their size, cutting off escape routes, forcing the insectoid ships into kill zones. Explosions lit the void, and the screams of dying Murata filled the comms channels. Aboard their embattled moon, the Weyam miners witnessed the spectacle with a mix of awe and horror. They had been no strangers to war themselves, but they had never seen combat of this terrifying efficiency. The humans seemed to move with a chilling, calculated intent, their objective not just victory, but absolute annihilation. The Murata, once a proud and ambitious race, were shattered in the span of a few hours. Their fleet lay in a smoking ruin, their warriors turned to stardust, and their dreams of conquest died alongside them. Word spread through the star lanes like wildfire. The peacekeepers had arrived and their wrath was absolute. Meanwhile, the human fleet turned its attention to the Weyam defenders, but instead of the retribution the miners feared, a curt transmission ordered them to stand down. The threat was over. Humans, it seemed, were not interested in further bloodshed once their work was done. Caution replaced fear among the Weyam commanders. They sent envoys to the human flagship, seeking out those beings whose battle prowess left them shaken to the core. From the accounts of those envoys, a picture of humanity started to emerge. They were not warmongers, the Weyam learned. They despised brutality. But they understood, perhaps better than any other species in the galaxy, that the only surefire deterrent to war was the ability to wage it better than anyone else. The Murata debacle sent echoes of fear throughout the young, ambitious factions of the galaxy. Humans may not seek conflict, but they were its uncontested masters. Any species foolish enough to start a war faced not just defeat, but obliteration. The aftermath of the battle rippled far and wide. The Murata, humbled and shamed, slunk back to their home system, their expansionist ambitions crushed for the foreseeable future. Other young empires, their eyes on vulnerable neighbors, rethought their strategies. It was one thing to risk a border skirmish, quite another to invite the annihilation the humans wrought upon the Murata. For the Weyam, life resumed on their asteroid outpost, yet the war had left an indelible mark. They continued their mining operations with newfound vigor, grateful for their continued existence, but also unsettled by the humans' terrifying potential. Their friendships with the humans deepened, colored with a mixture of respect and a sliver of fear. Across the galaxy, in countless backwater bars, seedy cantinas, and secure military compounds, the question echoed, why do we never fight the humans? The answers were many, and they changed depending on the species and their experiences. Some pointed to the overwhelming human firepower, their mastery of space combat, and the cold resolve etched into every encounter. Others, more thoughtful, focused on the humans' lack of aggression. They never struck first, only responded with terrifyingly disproportionate force. Many saw it as simple pragmatism. The shortest route to peace was to make war a suicidal endeavor. Yet the question remained a puzzle, its solution just beyond the grasp of most galactic races. The Murata were too proud to admit the truth. The Weyam had seen only a glimpse of the darkness humanity was capable of. Few grasped the fundamental paradox that formed the bedrock of the human philosophy of war. Within the human fleets and the corridors of their admiralty ships, a different question arose. Was this sustainable? Was it right to become the galaxy's boogeyman, to perpetuate a peace born of absolute terror? There were no easy answers, only grim debates and hard choices. For now, their mission was clear. Prevent wars by being the undisputed nightmare of any would-be conquerors. The galaxy breathed a little easier. Borders remained stable, minor empires squabbled without escalating to all-out slaughter. But everyone kept a wary eye on the corner of space where the human fleets patrolled. They were the grim guardians, a monstrous necessity, the terrible price for a galaxy that would never truly understand how to achieve peace on its own. Across light years on the fringes of the galactic sprawl, a new threat was stirring. Meanwhile, the Xylari, a reclusive and technologically advanced species, saw the escalating conflict as an opportunity to further their own agenda. Operating in the shadows, they subtly manipulated tensions between the Murata and Weyam, sowing seeds of discord to destabilize the region. The humans and their imposed order were an obstacle, a blight to be cleansed. Initially, the Xylari operated in the shadows. They fermented unrest on border planets, supplied weapons and technology to disgruntled factions, and subtly guided empires towards collision courses with one another. It was a long game, a strategy aimed at destabilizing the status quo and eroding the humans' dominance bit by bit. News of these incidents filtered back to the human high command. Analysts sifted through the data, connecting a pattern behind seemingly unrelated events. Unlike the ambitious Murata, the Xylari posed a more subtle, insidious threat. They were not a swarm to be swatted away in a single battle, but a slow-burning poison intended to undermine the very fabric of galactic order. The humans responded cautiously. They couldn't simply annihilate planets based on suspicion and accusations. They needed proof, a smoking gun linking the Xylari to the escalating conflicts. Human agents fanned out, infiltrating insurgent cells, tapping into shadow networks, patiently piecing together the grand Xylari scheme. For the Weyam, the return of galactic tensions was a chilling reminder. They, too, began noticing the telltale signs of destabilization in their region of space. Old rivals suddenly rearmed, border skirmishes grew more common, Weyam security forces braced for a renewed era of conflict, and a profound sense of unease settled upon their subterranean cities. The elders among the Weyam reached out to their human contacts, expressing their fears, subtly asking whether the humans were still capable and willing to be the protectors they once were. The humans' response was both reassuring and unsettling in its directness. The Xylari threat was understood. Preparations were already underway. War was coming, but this time it wouldn't be a quick surgical strike like the Murata debacle. This time an entire ideology would have to be confronted. The Xylari were a patient people, confident in the philosophy of progress through conflict. They saw the galaxy as a vast laboratory and war as the ultimate catalyst for evolution. The stagnating peace enforced by the humans was stifling the true potential of countless civilizations, and the humans themselves, the Xylari believed, would eventually fall victim to their own complacency. Their grand scheme reached its crescendo when they successfully instigated a full-blown war between two mid-tier empires, carefully orchestrated and fueled with cutting-edge Xylari weaponry. The death toll mounted rapidly. Planets turned to scorched wasteland and the galactic community looked on in horror. This was the moment the Xylari waited for. They broadcasted their message on every comm channel. The humans were no longer capable of maintaining order. Their peace was an illusion. The galaxy must embrace war, embrace the cleansing fire that would bring forth a new era of advancement. Across human space, the call rang out as an open declaration. The Xylari had abandoned their pretense of subtlety, revealing themselves as the puppet masters behind the escalating conflicts. The human admirals, seasoned veterans of countless brief, decisive wars, found themselves facing a different beast. This was an existential challenge, a conflict not against an overly ambitious race, but against an ingrained philosophy, a dark mirror to their own belief in peace through superior force. The human commonwealth mobilized. Fleets were recalled from the fringes, shipyards churned out war machines at an unprecedented rate, and the human worlds hummed with the grim determination of a people preparing to fight for their lives. The Weyam, watching their allies gear up, understood the stakes. The war wouldn't be settled with a single brutal demonstration of human military might. It was a battle for hearts and minds, and the price of failure was too terrible to fathom. Yet alongside the trepidation flickered a sense of determination. The Weyam were builders, creators, but they were no strangers to war. If the peace they cherished was to be defended, they too would have to fight. The war with the Xylari and their manipulated allies was unlike any conflict the humans had faced. It was a war of attrition, of guerrilla strikes, of targeted sabotage. The Xylari aimed not for territorial gain, but to disrupt the interconnected web that underpinned human trade and logistics. Supply lines were severed, vital star bases sabotaged, entire planets plunged into chaos with carefully planted misinformation. Human casualties mounted, but far more concerning was the toll upon civilian populations across numerous worlds. The Xylari were merciless, striking at soft targets, deliberately blurring the lines between war zone and safe haven. This was not a war for conquest. It was about proving the fragility of the humans' enforced order. The human high command faced impossible choices. They couldn't shield every planet, protect every convoy. Yet every civilian death, every atrocity fueled the Xylari narrative. Humans were fallible. They could not guarantee peace and prosperity, and the galaxy would be better off descending back into conflict. Amongst the humans, doubt festered. Had they become too soft? Too focused on maintaining stability? Perhaps the Xylari were right. The galaxy needed the chaos of war to progress. It was a dangerous, seductive line of thought, one that threatened to unravel centuries of hard-won unity. The Weyam, hardened by their own battles, sent their toughest, shrewdest warriors to assist their human allies. They joined the elite human commando squads operating deep behind the front lines, striking at the heart of the Xylari's logistical arteries. Slowly, with blood and sacrifice, the tide began to turn. Human adaptability honed in countless battlefields proved a potent weapon. The Weyam, with their expertise in subterranean warfare and logistics, offered invaluable support. Yet the war dragged on. The Xylari, driven by a chilling fanaticism, were willing to expend staggering numbers to achieve their goals. Each supply chain protected, every act of terrorism prevented, cost dearly in human and Weyam lives. The conflict with the Xylari was unlike any the humans had faced before. It was not just a battle for territory, but a struggle against an ideology that threatened the very fabric of galactic order. As casualties mounted and atrocities were committed on both sides, dissent grew within the human ranks, leading to internal strife and moral questioning. As the war descended into a bloody stalemate, a new horror emerged. Xylari bioweapons, their existence only whispered of in intelligence reports, were unleashed on a contested world. The virus ravaged the population, twisting bodies and shattering minds. It was an act of such depravity that even hardened human commanders faltered. Retaliation was swift and merciless. Human orbital strikes reduced the world to cinders, denying the Xylari a chance to weaponize the plague. The message was clear. There were lines the humans would not allow to be crossed. They possessed the power to annihilate entire planets, and they would use it if necessary. The Xylari, undeterred, doubled down. They released even more virulent pathogens, seeding them into crowded trade hubs and refugee camps. The galaxy reeled, entire sectors quarantined in a desperate bid to contain the spread. Chaos reigned, and the Xylari's narrative gained traction again. The humans could not protect anyone, their peace a toxic lie. Panic blossomed on a dozen worlds, fueling unrest and turning former allies against one another. Through the spreading mayhem, a desperate plan formed in the human admiralty. The Xylari strategy relied on creating instability and chaos, eroding the human-led order from within. But what if that chaos could be turned against them? What if instead of protecting every planet, the humans unleashed a calculated wave of controlled destruction? A strategic retreat that would upend the very foundation of the Xylari's scheme. The operation was as daring as it was morally repugnant. Secret fleets were assembled, carrying doomsday weapons of terrifying potency. The target was a cluster of heavily populated Xylari worlds. Not military strongholds, but thriving civilian centers. This would be a demonstration not of power, but of a willingness to inflict unacceptable casualties to scorch the heartland of their fanatical enemy. The devastation was absolute. Cities turned to molten craters, populations vaporized. It was an atrocity that echoed across the galaxy, and many of the humans' staunchest allies recoiled in horror. The Weyam, themselves no strangers to the horrors of war, found their shared history with the humans strained. Was this the true price of peace? Was this what humanity had become? The aftermath of the Xylari homeworld attack was disastrous. The war itself hung in a precarious balance, but galactic opinion had swung decisively against the humans. Their reputation, once tarnished but respected, was now shattered. Even those who benefited from the enforced peace saw the humans as monsters, capable of cruelties eclipsing those of even the most savage regimes. The Xylari seized the opportunity with chilling efficiency. They branded the humans as galactic butchers, framing themselves as the sole defenders against monstrous tyranny. Their propaganda machine worked overtime, twisting the truth and portraying their relentless warmongering as a selfless crusade to liberate the galaxy from the human yoke. Disillusionment spread within the human commonwealth. Many worlds, disgusted by the calculated act of genocide, wavered in their support. The hard-won unity that fueled their war machine began to crack. Some demanded a return to isolationism, a desperate bid to salvage their humanity, while others called for an even greater show of force, convinced that only absolute victory would silence the Xylari and their newfound allies. For the Weyam, the situation was unbearable, torn between the respect for the humans' prowess and the horror at their actions. They found themselves caught in a moral no-man's land. They could not align with the Xylari's fanatical doctrine of endless conflict, but the price the humans were willing to pay for order seemed far too high. Amidst the internal strife, the Xylari struck. Their forces, reinforced with fresh waves of warriors driven by righteous hatred, tore into poorly defended sectors of human space. It was a reversal of the war's initial stages, with the humans struggling to defend their own territory from a vengeful onslaught. The Weyam were forced to make a choice. Stand with the humans, even as doubts gnawed at them, or face the rising tide of the revitalized Xylari alone. It was an agonizing decision, but in the end they recognized a terrible truth. While they abhorred the extremes the humans had resorted to, they knew that a Xylari-dominated galaxy would be far worse. The Weyam ships joined the human fleets in desperate last stands. Their mining equipment was refitted for war, their intricate subterranean networks turned into fortresses against the Xylari advance. It was a strange, begrudging alliance born of necessity, not trust, yet it proved surprisingly effective. The war ground on with a horrific brutality on both sides. The humans, driven to the brink, responded in kind. Worlds were laid to waste. Entire fleets sacrificed in suicidal gambles aimed at crippling the Xylari war machine. Amidst the carnage, any semblance of honor and diplomacy vanished, devoured by the fires of hatred. And yet, beneath the surface of madness, a glimmer of hope emerged. Within the human ranks, dissent grew louder. Officers haunted by the atrocities committed in their name began to defy orders. Sabotage, covert peace overtures, even mutinies became a terrifying reality. The human commonwealth, once a monolith, teetered on the brink of civil war. The Xylari, sensing weakness, redoubled their efforts, but their fanaticism blinded them to a chilling realization. In the pursuit of their twisted ideology, they had become the mirror image of their enemy. They too were willing to sacrifice anything and everything in the name of their perverse vision of progress. The galaxy burned. Worlds once bastions of peace and commerce, symbols of the order the humans had strived to uphold, were consumed by an endless cycle of violence and retribution. Amidst the ruins and hushed tones and clandestine meetings, a desperate question was whispered, echoing the one that haunted so many after the Murata debacle. Why do we never fight the humans? The answers had become blurred, twisted almost beyond recognition. For some, humans were still the terrifying guardians, a grim deterrent against complete self-destruction. Others saw only monsters, no better than the genocidal fanatics they opposed. And still, a few began to glimpse a terrible, soul-crushing truth. Perhaps the humans weren't exceptional. Maybe the darkness was within all sentient beings, a monstrous potential waiting to be unleashed under the right circumstances. Perhaps the true question wasn't why we never fight the humans, but why do we fight at all? The Weyam caught in this whirlwind of death and disillusionment clung stubbornly to existence. Their deep-rooted pragmatism provided a sliver of sanity. They fought alongside the humans they no longer fully trusted, not out of loyalty, but because they understood that the universe offered no other viable choice. Their elders, hardened by a lifetime of conflict, reached out to the human dissidents, a risky gamble, yet one born of the absolute necessity of ending the slaughter. The end of the war came not with a decisive battle nor a grand treaty, but with a whimper. Exhausted, bled dry by a conflict that seemed to serve no ultimate purpose, both the humans and the Xylari faltered. Their fleets, once symbols of unyielding might, became ghost ships crewed by hollow-eyed souls. The turning point was as unforeseen as it was brutal. A rogue splinter faction, born from within the fractured human forces, went off the rails entirely. Refusing to recognize any authority, they unleashed the last of the human doomsday weapons on a neutral world. A final act of nihilistic destruction that sickened even the most ardent warmongers within the Xylari ranks. The galaxy reeled. This is not war, but madness. The Xylari, their ranks thinned and their fanatical certainty wavering, silently pulled back from the last several key systems. Human admirals, shamed and disgusted by the acts of their own people, ordered a ceasefire. The war machine sputtered to a halt, not with pride or honor, but a weary, bone-deep revulsion. In the quiet that followed, the Weyam stepped into the void as a neutral party, untarnished by the worst excesses of either faction. They became the reluctant brokers of peace. They hosted the first tentative talks, not between diplomats or generals, but between weary veterans, simple soldiers, humans and Xylari alike, who shared the common horror of witnessing what their own species were capable of. The negotiations were a grueling, heartbreaking endeavor. There was too much blood spilled, too many atrocities committed for easy forgiveness. But slowly, out of the shared exhaustion and desperate desire to simply not fight anymore, a fragile agreement coalesced. Ceasefire zones were established, trade cautiously resumed. The Xylari retreated to their star systems, scarred and shaken, their philosophy of endless conflict forever tainted. For the humans, the aftermath was more tumultuous. Civil war loomed as factions clashed over the future of their civilization. The question hanging over them was existential. If peace through overwhelming force led to this cataclysm, what was left? Who were they, truly, once stripped of their self-appointed role as galactic enforcers? The Weyam, watching their shattered allies, kept their distance. They offered what aid they could, but understood that the humans needed to find their own answers amidst the wreckage. Time and much soul-searching would be needed before trust could be rebuilt. As the galaxy began to rebuild, questions lingered about the true nature of peace and the price they had paid to achieve it. The humans, once seen as guardians of order, now grappled with their own role in perpetuating the cycle of violence. Amidst the uncertainty, the Weyam remained steadfast, their pragmatic outlook offering a beacon of hope in a galaxy still haunted by the echoes of war.